Good afternoon. I'm Father Alexander. This is St. Peter's Hove. Welcome to our 211th step in our walking tour through the Bible, which I'm going to look at chapter 2 of the book of Ecclesiastes. Now, do you remember the atheist bus campaign? If you're outside England, you won't, but if you were in England, you will remember it. It's actually some time ago. I just looked it up. The atheist bus campaign took place in 2008, about in October, this time of year, and it had slogans on buses, and the slogan was, "There's probably no God, so now stop worrying and enjoy your life." Okay, well, what a brilliant slogan that was. What a brilliant slogan that is. There's probably no God, so stop worrying and enjoy your life. This slogan, I think, and I don't want to be rude here, underlines the vacuity of much atheist discourse, modern atheist discourse. Okay, there's probably no God. You can't be sure there's no God. Leave that aside. Stop worrying and enjoy your life. Well, first of all, are the people who are worried and not enjoying their lives, is that because of God? Because they're worried about whether God exists or not? No, it isn't. The truth of the matter is, modern atheism falls down because it doesn't really take existential questions seriously. When we say, "I'm worried," you could say, "I'm worried about the political situation." Well, the political situation will change and maybe then you'll stop worrying. But there's also, "I'm worried," where anxiety, angst, as the philosophers call it, or Sorge, care, as they call it, anxiety is woven into the fabric of life. I'm never completely at home in this world. I'm worried about all sorts of, I'm just worried. I'm not worried about things. Worry is something I live with. And to say to somebody, "Well, just enjoy your life," well, that's great. I want to enjoy my life. I feel I ought to enjoy my life. I feel that people around me are enjoying their lives, but I don't know how to enjoy my life because whatever I turn to doesn't quite deliver the enjoyment that I hoped it would give me. I want to be happy. I seek happiness. But whenever I think I've found happiness, happiness eludes me. Now, that is just a very simple existential condition. And I think the atheists, with their atheist bus campaign, they rather made themselves look a bit ridiculous because they didn't take seriously these existential questions that people face every day. It's banal, it's stupid, and in some ways insulting to tell people who are worried to stop worrying and enjoy their lives. If I went into a mental hospital where there were people who were in the depths of depression and say, "Oh, stop worrying and enjoy your life," that would really, I'd be hustled out pretty quickly, I think. That would really not be the solution. It's a banal and stupid thing to say. Now, in chapter 2 of Ecclesiastes, the preacher is exploring a similar sort of territory. "I thought to myself," he says, "very well, I'll try pleasure and see what enjoyment has to offer." In other words, he's wondering what he's going to do in this life. Well, I'll try pleasure and enjoyment. In other words, I'll become a hedonist. I'll become one of those people that existed at the court of Versailles, a libertine, somebody who will just go around enjoying himself. I'll become an Epicurean. Though the Epicureans, it has to be said, didn't believe in enjoying yourself in the same way as the libertines did, or indeed modern hedonists do. The Epicureans were really quite restrained. They believed restraint was the best way forward for and most guaranteed happiness. But this was futile too, says the preacher. It was vanity too. This laughter, I reflected, is madness. This pleasure, no use at all. I decided to hand my body over to drinking wine, my mind still guiding me in wisdom. I resolved to embrace folly, to discover the best way for people to spend their days under the sun. I worked on a grand scale, built myself palaces, planted vineyards, made myself gardens and orchards, planting every kind of fruit tree in them, had pools made for watering the young trees of my plantations. I bought slaves, male and female, had hen-born slaves as well, herds and flocks too, more than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold. The treasures of kings and provinces acquired singers, men and women, and every human luxury, chest upon chest of it. So I grew great, greater than anyone in Jerusalem before me, nor did my wisdom leave me. I denied my eyes nothing that they desired, refused my heart no pleasure, for I found all my hard work a pleasure. Such was the return for all my efforts. I then reflected on all that my hands had achieved, and all the effort I had put into its achieving. What futility it all was. What chasing after the wind. There's nothing to be gained under the sun. Well, he's right, isn't he? I think we've all been there, haven't we, where we've been at the most wonderful party and everybody's been enjoying themselves, and we've suddenly thought, well, is this it? Is this really all that life has to offer? There's a wonderful, wonderful scene in that great film, Educating Rita, in which Julie Walters is sitting at the pub and they're all singing this song and everybody's very happy in the way that people in Liverpool often are. And she's feeling a bit, and she's feeling depressed. She doesn't fit in. And she says there must be better songs to sing. And indeed, there were better songs to sing, but she didn't want to sing any of them. This idea that we are distaccato, as the Italians love to say, that we're outsiders, that we don't fit in, that what pleases everybody else doesn't please us. This is a given in human experience. It comes up again and again and again. So this guy, the preacher, amasses wealth. He does all the things that would make a man happy in the ancient world. He's even got these wonderful luxuries of these pools in his garden. Don't forget, in a dry climate, having a water garden was considered the height of luxury. He's got slaves, he's got singers, he's got dancers, he's got everything you could possibly want. And yet it's all futile. It hasn't assuaged the existential question. Now, I think we all know that the hunt for pleasure, the search for pleasure, is a search that doesn't yield spectacular results. If we dedicate ourselves to pleasure, I suppose there might be some people who've dedicated themselves to pleasure and who've really enjoyed themselves in the process and had wonderful, happy lives. But for most of us, pleasure alone is not enough. Pleasure's great as part of a full life, but it's not enough on its own. Pleasure has got to have some sort of underlying existential grounding for it to bring us true happiness. What that is, of course, I would answer with St. Thomas Aquinas, is our pleasures have got to reinforce our essential natures. They've got to be something that reinforces our human flourishing, our living in accordance with the natural law. If we live in accordance with the natural law, we flourish as human beings. If we live reasonable lives, and therefore being reasonable creatures, we come to a level of human flourishing, pleasures can be part of that life. But pleasure itself, unless it's rooted and grounded in the natural law and the idea of our a complete vision of human flourishing, pleasures won't do us any good at all. Then, of course, he decides to go herring after philosophy, and he says, and then he says, there is. He said, this is futile too. This is futile too, and grossly unjust. For what does he gain for all the toil and strain that he's undergone under the sun? Since his days are full of sorrow, his work is full of stress, and even at night he has no peace of mind. This is futile too. He's talking about the search for wisdom. Then he says, there is no happiness except in eating and drinking. Well, and that, of course, is something done by all sorts of people. There's even by slaves. The slaves stop and have something to eat and drink in the midst of their work, and they sit in the shade and think, oh, this is great. Everybody has pleasure in food and drink. So it's the basic pleasure of being alive that is the only pleasure, and enjoying one's achievements. I see that this comes from God's hand. For who would get anything to eat and drink unless it all came from him? Wisdom, knowledge, and joy God gives to those who please him. But on the sinner, he lays the task of gathering and storing up for someone who is pleasing to him. This too is folly and chasing after the wind. Well, it's an interesting passage. Do read chapter 2. I think it is telling us about the vanity of the hedonistic life. In many ways, just sit down there with a drink and with something to eat in an ordinary sense. In other words, the sort of pleasures of existence that everybody can share and accept them as a gift that comes from God, and you'll be okay. Famous story, as you know, about a man who was a fisherman who had very little, and he was sitting by the sea having come back from fishing, and he meets this other man, and this other man says, "Oh, you're a fisherman. I want to go fishing." He said, "Oh, do you?" He said, "Yes, yes. When I've retired, I'm going to take up fishing." "Oh, really? Why don't you take up fishing now?" "Well, you see, I've got to make lots of money. I've got to make millions and millions of pounds, and so on. I've got a very important job, and so on. When all that's over, then I'll take up fishing." And the fisherman said, "Well, I just went straight to fishing because it's what I like doing, without all that rigmarole about making millions of pounds in the meantime. And as for you, dedicated to making millions of pounds and being an important man, I don't think you're ever going to get round to giving it all up and taking up fishing." And which is a pity, because fishing, after all, is, you said, the only thing you really want to do. Okay, all the best. God is good. Let us try and search for Him and not lose ourselves in the ultimately disappointing search for pleasure.